Yo guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the comic collected editions, trades, and some oversized hardcovers that I did read in the month of March and here at the beginning of April, because I did some big comic reading last month, and I'm trying to read through all of the trades that I have, and I've been getting more into picking up trades and less single issues lately. So I have a lot to talk about today, so I won't beat around the bush too much. I hope you all enjoy the video, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate that. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is my DC books that I read. So in preparation for Hush 2 coming out, Batman Hush 2 by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee, I did go back and I I read for the first time the original Batman Hush, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, the mystery was awesome. Of course, Jim Lee's art is fantastic, and I mean, the story was just awesome. It was just like a rabbit hole that just kept getting deeper and deeper, and that's one thing I really like about Batman, is when creators lean more into his more detective sleuth side and focus a lot on like the detective aspect of Batman, which I feel like people don't always do, writers don't always do. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. It tied in with a bunch of different characters throughout the DC universe, not just like Batman rogues. And it's also where we're first introduced to the idea of Jason Todd being reborn, or like resurrected or whatever, which isn't the case in this exactly, but is sort of where, you know, the idea was put out there, and is the reason why we have Red Hood today, who is one of my favorite DC characters. So it's an important piece of Batman history. It's one of the most notorious Batman runs, like Batman stories ever. And you know, of course, with the Hush 2 coming out, I had to read it. So just to have some prior knowledge and context going into the sequel, which I read that first issue, and it was dope. It was my book of the week that week. But also, I want to read more about Red Hood as a character, which granted, I know there isn't a lot, but this is sort of like the starting point where that idea of Jason being, you know, resurrected was introduced. So yeah, I really enjoyed Batman Hush. I thought it was super sick, and it definitely held up. Now, also with the DC, I have two hardcovers that I ended up getting back in March. That was an expensive week, let me tell you. I definitely should not have gotten both of these in the same week. But the first one that I did read was, I got around to reading Dark Knights of Steel Allwinter. I thought this was actually super sick. I'm not a big fan, typically, of miniseries, but what I've come to find out is it's usually not miniseries that's the problem. I thought that it was. But when you actually have a decent writer that's writing it well, you can still have a mini-series and it feel emotional and still have stakes. It's just that I guess maybe the mini-series or shorter runs that I was reading before maybe weren't the best written in general. It wasn't the fact that it was a mini-series, it's just that it was probably poorly written. So I've sort of amended my thoughts on comic book miniseries, especially after reading Allwinter here, which I believe is 5 or 6 issues. Yeah, 6 issues. And I actually really enjoyed it. Obviously, if it was longer, I would have enjoyed it more, because I do like longer comic series. But for it being 6 issues, it did a lot that I thought was super cool. I haven't read the original Dark Knights of Steel, which I know I probably ought to, since this is sort of like a spin-off / sequel, but I didn't have any problem understanding what was happening reading this. It was pretty self-contained, but there's like also references to the original, which of course I didn't have the full context for. But yeah, this is a solid read. I thought the art was awesome. It's like Deathstroke as a Viking, and I'm a big, Viking guy. But if I crack this open a little bit, just the naked hardcover of the art on that is just awesome. So yeah, I actually really freaking enjoyed it. I thought it was dope. And the last DC book that I did read back in March, or maybe it was at the beginning of this month, but I think it was the end of March, is I did read Zatanna Bring Down the House. This came out, like I said, the same day as the Allwinter, so these being like $30 a piece, that was kind of expensive. But yeah, Zatanna is a character that I want to read more into, because I think she's fascinating. I like her character design a lot. She's like this hot magician chick, but she's got like magic powers that I like the more fantastical side of the DC world as well, and especially in this run she has some to do with like Constantine, who's a character that I also want to read more about. But yeah, that side of the DC universe having to do with the supernatural and with demons and stuff like that, with like Trigon, I think somehow ties into like the magic. I could be wrong, I'm not the biggest DC head, but characters like Raven and Zatanna and Constantine, those are characters that I enjoy, and I want to learn more about that side of the world, but Zatanna in particular. And this miniseries was really cool. I really like the art style in it. I don't know exactly who did the art, Javier Rodriguez. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Also, the story wasn't bad. I enjoyed the little quest. Again, it's like, was it 5 issues? Yeah. It's a 5-issue miniseries, so like there wasn't a lot that happened, but it was just kind of fun. It was trippy. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a Black Label series, so maybe it was a little bit more mature, but like, honestly, I don't know why. I guess I do know why publishers do this with the whole Black Label or Red Band or whatever. Sometimes it's a little bit more mature, but like, I feel like maybe it's just a marketing thing to drive up sales, maybe. I don't know, because this wasn't really all that much crazier than like a normal comic, so I don't really understand why it's a Black Label, or if it's just like not main continuity. Maybe that's what it is. I don't really understand. And a similar thing with the Red Bands over at Marvel. I don't get it. Anywho, I did read this because I was reading the new Zatanna miniseries and I wasn't super vibing with it. I did end up dropping that. I was gonna do an episode of the pull list for March, but never did that, partly because I've been dropping a lot of books and cutting down on the single issues I pick up in turn for trades and stuff like that. So but I'm probably gonna end up getting the trade for that new Zatanna run just so I can read it and compare. But I mean, this in its first couple of issues was better in my opinion than that new Zatanna run in its first couple of issues by far. Now moving over to the Marvel books, I'm gonna first touch on something that I'm not gonna go super in depth in because I kind of want to do its own video. But one of the first things that I did read back in March was Daredevil Yellow. This is the new reprint by Marvel, obviously. What am I saying? But it's written by Jeff Loeb with art by Tim Sale. Absolutely loved this, I'll just say that. I'm going to cover this in its own video. Well, not its own video, but and then early this month, I read both of these. I read The Man Without Fear and also Daredevil Born Again. In fact, I just read this. I finished reading it like an hour ago, and this I read earlier in the week, I believe, or late last week, something like that. So I've been getting in to Daredevil pretty heavily because, of course, I've been watching the show. Absolutely love the show. It's freaking brilliant. But I want to read more of the comics because from what I understand, Daredevil is one of the most consistently good, like well-written Marvel characters in the entire Marvel catalog. And from what I understand, and just like based on, what it looks like my own perception and like also the way people talk about it, the new Daredevil run seems to be like one of the first Daredevil runs that's kind of buns, which is high praise for a character that's been around since the 60s. I would say probably his 60s stuff isn't that good, like most comics from that era, the Silver Age or whatever, or Silver Age comics. I'm just not personally the biggest fan of, but when Frank Miller took over in the 80s, kind of turned the character around, and ever since then, for the most part, from what I understand, Daredevil has been pretty solid. So yeah, he's a character I'm very interested in reading more about, and all three of these knocked it out of the park, but I'm wanting to do a separate Daredevil video talking about these three in particular, because yeah, I think it deserves its own video. And the last couple of Marvel things that I did want to talk about today, I finally got around to reading Ultimate Spider-Man. I got this way back when it first came out, I think late last year in like September or something, and then this just came out I think a few weeks ago, maybe sometime last month I think, but I finally got it, and since I had both trades, I just went ahead and read them. I read this one, and then I bought the trade for number 2, and then I just read them like that. What to say though, this is actually my first Spider-Man comic I've ever read, and it's dope. I really enjoyed Ultimate Spider-Man, just such a different take on Spider-Man, but it's samey at the same time. Like, it's just super cool. It reminds me a lot, obviously it's the Ultimate Universe, but it reminds me a lot of what they're doing with Absolute Batman, where it's not super far-fetched, it's not a complete reinvention. It's still very similar, but there's some major differences. And obviously the Ultimate Universe and the Absolute Universe are similar in concept, but they're very different in how they're handling their heroes and villains, and there's a lot more politicking, I would say, going on in the Ultimate Universe because of the Maker and his council or whatever. So it's still very different, but just on a conceptual level, what they're doing with Absolute Batman, I think, is most similar to, probably, I would say, Absolute Spider-Man and Batman. But yeah, that being said, I really enjoyed this, and this trade number 2 ended on such a cliffhanger, so it sucks that I have to wait until, what is it, the fall, I think, for volume 3. I have an idea of what's going to happen with the Kraven's Last Hunt sort of homage that's going to happen, but yeah, the way that volume 2 ended was just wild. But yeah, Hickman's writing is fantastic on this, and I really love Chiquetto's, or Cachetto's, I don't know exactly how you pronounce it, Chiquetto, Chiquetto's art. I just think it's fantastic as well. So yeah, I'm really enjoying Ultimate Spider-Man. I don't have any of the single issues, just gonna read it in trades. But yeah, freaking fantastic. Probably the best Ultimate title, honestly. I like Ultimate Wolverine a lot. Ultimate X-Men's alright. I mean, I really enjoyed Ultimate X-Men, but like, that's one word. So I feel like I really need to read that in trades because it's a little convoluted. But Spider-Man all around is just consistently fantastic. And lastly, we got to talk about the indie books, obviously. Indie has just been knocking it out of the park for me personally. There's just so much excitement I have around indie books compared to both DC and Marvel, just generally speaking. I think it's super fresh. There's a bunch of stuff I'm going to be getting into, like the Ghost Machine books and all of that here this month, hopefully. If not, I'm reading a big indie book right now, which I don't know if you can see it behind me right here. If you guys, if you know, you know. I just started reading that, read the first issue. But my point is that indie has just been awesome, and I've been dipping my toes more into indie books. So there's a couple of things we got here. First thing, got No One. This is by Kyle Higgins, and it's a part of the super massive verse, I think it is called, from Image Comics, but it's a part of like the whole Radiant Black, what's the other one, Rogue Sun, Radiant Pink, I think it's called, like everything having to do with that shit. This is like in the same universe, I'm pretty sure. Which I haven't read any of those, but I've heard Radiant Black in particular is really good, kind of similar to Invincible, so maybe I'll check that out at some point. But No One started off as kind of like a slow burn, like mystery, crime, like murder mystery, like kind of deal with like some vigilante stuff. I'm not gonna go into like a full in-depth review because there's a lot in this that's like super spoilery, and it's all like self-contained, so I don't want to spoil anything for people that do want to check it out. But overall, it ended up being kind of disappointing. I'd say like towards the end, like the ending was kind of dumb. To me, it reminded me a lot of Death Note. If you guys have watched Death Note or read Death Note, it reminded me of that. If you guys know how Death Note ends, it reminded me of that a lot, this ending, which I wasn't a fan of then, and I wasn't a fan of this, really. It ends in a very similar way, in my opinion, I'll just say that. And it ended up being kind of disappointing, because anytime we got to see this guy right here, No One, he was super cool, almost like a Batman or a Daredevil kind of character, just completely shrouded in mystery. He was the most interesting part about this comic, but like every time he showed up, they didn't do anything with him. I would have liked to see much more done with his character, and a heavier emphasis on his character. He was just severely underutilized, and I think more action with him would have been awesome. It would have made this comic 10 times better. And by the end, it all sort of kind of felt pointless. Like, not pointless, but like kind of like, bruh, like, I read all this just for that. Like, really, that's kind of how I felt after reading it. So I liked a lot of the build-up, the slow burn mystery, like murder mystery kind of deal with the vigilantes, and there's like a serial killer on the loose, and they're trying to figure out all this stuff. And I know there's a bunch of tie-in stuff with like a podcast you can listen to, like an actual podcast that ties in with the story. I didn't do all that. I was just trying to read the comic, and it was alright. Definitely not the best thing I've ever read. It looks super cool, it sounds super interesting, and a lot of it was, but I think that it was kind of mid, honestly. Like, I don't know. I enjoyed it for the most part, but yeah, definitely not my favorite thing I've ever read. Now, moving over to the last couple of things, definitely more positive reviews, something I had a lot of fun with, and that is Transformers by Daniel Warren Johnson. I have volume 1 and volume 2 here. In fact, I ended up buying volume 2 first, and then I had this back ordered, and then finally it came, so I was able to read them back to back. And let me say, I really enjoyed it. I've been trying to read more of Daniel Warren Johnson's stuff, because I really enjoy his art, especially when you've got Mike Spicer on colors. They're just a duo to be reckoned with in the comic book world, of course. Working together on Wonder Woman, Dead Earth. And then later on in this, apparently, this is where Jorge Corona gets on the book as the main artist, which I was aware of. But honestly, I can't tell a difference between his imitation of Daniel Warren Johnson's art and Daniel Warren Johnson's art. If I didn't know any better, I would say Daniel Warren Johnson was on art the entire book. Yeah, I had, like, it's seamless, really. Maybe if I, like, looked really hard at it, but it's basically the same. I think Jorge Corona does a great job as well. I really enjoyed his art in Ain't No Grave that he did with Scotty Young. So yeah, I mean, it's just like kind of an all-star team working on this. Mike Spicer, Daniel Warren Johnson, Jorge Corona in the second volume. I don't know exactly which issue he was introduced on art on, because the trades don't really tell you the issue. That's something I noticed with these Transformers trades, is that it's just like kind of one continuous story. It never really breaks up, so it's hard to tell what issue stuff is in unless you actually have the like single issues to compare. Anyway, I really enjoyed this. I think the story is cool. All of the characters are really awesome. The action sequences are dope. There's a few specific scenes with Optimus in particular just going crazy. I really enjoyed it. Also, I think it was RC, the one that turns into the Lamborghini, I think. Yeah, where there's a part where she like jumps off like a dam and like does like a skirt movement like on the side of the dam. Like, you guys gotta read this. Like, the action sequences are super dope. I've been a fan of Transformers, not super heavily, but I grew up on the Michael Bay movies when I was younger, and you know, I've had Transformers action figures you know, all my life, and anytime I see a yellow Camaro, I'm like, oh, it's Bumblebee, you know what I'm saying? So I'm familiar with Transformers to some extent, but it's just cool to learn more about the lore, you know, because I haven't been really into it since I was like little, so there's not a lot that I remember other than like the main Transformers that are in the pop culture zeitgeist, like Optimus and Bumblebee and Megatron and Soundwave, like the really popular ones. I'm not familiar with many of the other ones, so it's kind of cool learning more about the world. And yeah, I just really enjoy this story a lot. Interested to see what happens with Megatron. I know Bumblebee caught a bullet in the first issue, like he gone, and based on my understanding, I think Daniel Warren Johnson just didn't want to write Bumblebee. He doesn't like Bumblebee, so he killed him off in like the first issue, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens and what characters get introduced and all that. But yeah, Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers is freaking dope. But anyways, guys, that's gonna about do it for today's video. That's everything, all the trades that I did read back in March, and mostly everything up until now. The only couple of things that I've read this month are those two Daredevil trades, which be expecting a video on that. I'm going to be talking about Daredevil as a character and what I like and dislike about these books. Mostly positive, though, because I really enjoy it. So stay tuned for that video. I'll make a separate video on that. But yeah, I hope you all enjoy. If you guys have any recommendations, as always, drop them in the comments. I would love to hear it, because I'm trying to get more heavy into comics and all that. So if you got some ideas based on like my reviews here and what you guys think that I would like, shit that I would like, let me know. I would greatly appreciate that also. Or if you want to hit me up on Discord, you can press the link in the description. It takes you to our server, and there you can interact with me and the homies on there, talk about comics and manga and games, all that cool stuff. But yeah, guys, I appreciate y'all stopping by, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.